Well, thank you all so much for this great opportunity for my students and also for me. I've had a lot of fun. Special thanks to Julia, because I feel like we might have taken a few years off your life going to the Emergency Manager Center. We really appreciate your coordination. So we worked on extreme heat communication. You all probably are familiar with the fact that in Arizona, and really everywhere, heat kills more people than any other meteorological event. Not something we think of as particularly dangerous, but definitely is particularly dangerous. And because we're so acclimated, communicating that risk can be really, really difficult. And it often involves a lot of different strategies coming together. So what my students worked on this semester, phase one, was researching different audiences in Peoria who were most vulnerable to heat, and then creating heat infographics targeted to those audiences so that they can get the information they need. We then used some eye tracking software to figure out what sort of draws people attention the most in those infographics. That will be part of our reports. But the second phase was that my students all had individual research projects. Like I mentioned, heat communication has a lot of dimensions. My students have really diverse backgrounds and skill sets, so they all have individual projects. We're going to watch their presentations. There's 19 of them. It's going to be like a recommendations buffet, kind of. Each student had 2 minutes to really highlight what they found. They're arranged in panels, and I will let them introduce themselves, my wonderful students, to you right now.
Hello, we are Eric, Gan, Daksh, Preksha, and Hari, and we will be considering the local impacts of heat communication. For my research, I started by trying to understand the heat index, which is a system that was created to judge the effective danger for human. This heat index was created using no physiological variables, so there's no scientific basis for the numbers or the danger presented. It has been proven to provide effective communication in moderate climates, but in the more extreme climates, especially of Arizona, it has been proven to be less effective. My recommendations would be utilizing the wet bulb globe temperature, which is a system that was created to include extra variables, including physiological ones. Some of these variables are cloud cover, wind speed, temperature, relative humidity, and activity level through the day. One study has also found a strong correlation between BMI and the convective heat transfer coefficient. So my overall recommendation would be craft a new formula utilizing the wet bulb globe temperature, BMI, and the total duration of activity level throughout the day, which would give an accurate measure of if someone is safe or not in the temperatures and humidity that is present.
I am from Thailand, a hot country, and never realized that people die from the heat until I came here. Deaths from the heat have risen in the past 2 years. Last year, the death in people inside without working air conditioning were really high. In order, people were more likely to die from heat indoors. People need timely information that is relevant to their situation. If their air conditioning doesn't work, they need to fix it or go somewhere cool. People outdoor need to be aware of the risks and how to reduce them, and recognize heat problem early on before they are a medical emergency. I propose a 3-part plan for communicating the right information to the right people. First, get a communication group together to work in advance of any heat emergency. Prepare material in advance of the emergency and selected location, messages, and media specific to audience of the interest. Consider a multiple media approach from the poster to social media, focusing messages in each approach to the most appropriate audience. For example, an infographic poster could convey a lot of information quickly and could be posted where people can see it often to repeat the message. Critical review and revision are an important step of this process. So what's good about this action approach? It doesn't all need to be done. Any of this action can be standalone. It can be tested and revised as necessary.
Hello. For the project Extreme Heat Communication, I chose to work on non-local population as target audience in Arizona. From the research, it was found out that non-locals contributed to around 60% of the population, and mostly they belong to educational and business backgrounds. Recently, Arizona has been witnessing an increase in number of deaths due to heat, and the numbers doubled since 2019. It thus becomes important to consider this group of population for spreading extreme heat awareness. Now, understanding heat impact on non-locals, it was found out that nearly 42% of the non-locals are unaware of the impact of heat on their health, and most of them faced heat outside their houses, and especially on pedestrian walks. Some of the common health impacts that they were facing were heat sunburns and symptoms of heat exhaustion. Surprisingly, when adaptation strategies were assessed, it was found out that cooling centers are least preferred and most tough to implement as an adaptation strategy among non-locals. So, and the easier adaptations strategies were hydration, use of AC, and keeping head covered. So I would finally, it is recommended to improve the reachability of cooling centers for non-locals, to extend community support to them. Also recommended to provide artificial and or natural shade on the pedestrian walks to reduce the impact of heat. And finally, it would be effective to reach non-locals online, as most of them use their mobiles and computers every day. Thank you.
So it is evident from past topics that heat is taking a toll on the lives of locals. But it's not just the locals, it is also taking a toll on businesses and reducing their outcomes. There is an apparent loss of human labor hours. Temperature difference between 2006 to 2016 relative to 1980 to 1990 led to almost 1.7 billion hours of labor losses in the USA itself. We can see like the more hot days we are experiencing in a year would lead to an estimated 0.12% decline in economic growth per annum. Heat does not only affect the businesses economically, but the lives of people working in the company and living nearby are also affected to a great extent. The intense heat is disrupting the employees' work-life balance, and majorly for those who are elderly and low-wage people. So from the table, like we can see, like the economical losses suffered by different states during the period of 1980 to 2010, that is a span of 30 years. So we can see like Texas experiences the highest losses, that is $0.8 billion, and Arizona also experienced quite high losses of $0.2 billion within that span of 30 years. So to counter these things, I would like to provide certain solutions. First of all, we could implement mitigation strategies to reduce urban heat, and which is like basically planning urban architecture and making buildings heat proof and providing optimal working conditions for the employee. Secondly, local government should enact heat related policies so that there are certain laws and rules should be implemented on businesses and personal people so heat could be minimized. Thirdly, we should promote sustainable projects which have minimum contribution towards the increase in extreme heat and can provide optimal working conditions for their employees. And last, we should also provide employees with the facilities like providing easy and convenient access to the water and heat resistant clothing so that they can work outdoors or even indoors and do physical labor in that extreme heat.
Hello everyone. I would like to add more recommendations to what my friends have said. I think we can reach the elderly population by putting out ads on TV and in news channels, also on radios. We can catch the attention of teens and adults by posting ads on social media. This would be different from posting on Peoria page, so we can reach out to more audience. It can be seasonal ads like what we see on during elections, but this won't be during summers. We can reach tourists by giving out brochures with free samples from local businesses or stickers from local artists so that we attract the tourists to pick the brochures up and read it and go back for more products from the local artists. So it's a win win situation. While I was researching, I found that in India, during extreme heat conditions, they use mud pots to store water. This way, they don't have to fetch water every day and the water stays cold for days. This is an inexpensive way to store cold water for longer. This comes to an end of our conclusion. Thank you for your time, and I hope our presentation was helpful to you. For further questions, please reach out to us. We would be happy to take our ideas forward and help the Peoria people. Thank
Hi, I'm Andrea D'Souza, and I'm pursuing an MS in User Experience. As part of my coursework for Fundamentals of Technical Communication, I have been working on a project titled Centering the User Experience of Heat Communication along with the city of Peoria. This project is a group effort along with my peers Akanksha Pawar, Ethan Santos, Hero Godsway, and Purvaja Madras. We have divided the project into 5 research questions. To tackle the first question, which is to communicate extreme heat and increase in heat responsibility in the city of Peoria, I have curated a framework to design communication formats that contribute to behavior change. The first step in this framework is to select target groups. In order to achieve this, we have to choose multiple target groups that will behave as motivators, protectors, and multipliers. For example, nurses help to motivate, influence, and help multiply heat responsibility and can be chosen as one of the target groups. The second step is to define the perception of heat, which means we must focus on the drivers and eliminate the barriers. For example, if we considered nurses as the target group from step 1, then protective barrier behavior is a driver for the nurses, whereas fatalism and work stress can be barriers to the nurses' protective behavior. In step 3, we develop target group specific communication formats. We must use the drivers we have selected in step 2 to fulfill any information needs and gaps in knowledge and behavior. We must then identify and use preferred communication channels that are suitable for the target audience. For example, if teachers are chosen as the target audience, then we can choose to introduce a training session which could be of a short lecture by a physician. Step 4 of the process would be to test the communication formats with a set of participants to uncover issues and to identify any unaddressed gaps. We can also choose to iterate on steps 2 and 3 based on the feedback received to improve the communication formats. I will be handing it over to Purvaja to carry on with the next part of the presentation.
Thank you, Andrea. I will now present about how the medium of communication impacts the information perceived by a user. The research methodology was divided into primary and secondary research. For primary research, I conducted surveys, user interviews, and interacted with an emergency manager from the city of Peoria. For secondary research, I reviewed dissertations in the field of heat, communication mediums, and human perception. Some of the survey highlights were that 53% of people have not come across any form of heat communication, and 57% of people emphasized the need for nonverbal cues while communicating extreme heat. It was interesting to know that 92% of people voted that digital medium would be an effective mode for communication. Moving on to the user interviews, the participants for the study were chosen based on the level of heat exposed by them on a daily basis. These are some of the pain points that they mentioned, and one such is by an employee stating he receives long unstructured emails talking about extreme heat and that it is not being useful. Based on the research, here are some of the recommendations. In order to communicate effectively, the content must ensure it has the right balance of text, visual, and numbers. Also including a creative component by adding interactive elements in order to grab the attention and increase users' engagement. Creating a more tangible solution, such as making an application which acts as a one-stop solution to locate cooling centers and finding information about heat symptoms and other resources. I will now hand it over to my teammate Hiro.
My research focused on how we could communicate heat information and risk to the people of Peoria so that it is persuasive enough for them to adopt the recommendations to stay safe. In order to find the benchmarks that are important for persuasive communication, I analyzed published publications about risk information communication and persuasive communication and found 3 important benchmarks that we could include in our design of information. One of them is the ease of information finding. The easier it is for people to find information about what they want or what they need to know, the more likely that they would adopt the recommendations. Just as we get advertisements on our phones and everywhere that we pass about the things that we want to buy, our ability to communicate extreme heat in such a manner would make it very important for people to adopt those recommendations. The second benchmark I found is that visualizations are important. Visualizations include images, graphs, illustrations. They help us draw attention to where we want people to look and to paint a picture that we want the people to remember about consequences, about the heat problem, and that way they are more likely to adopt our recommendations. And the third one is the way we frame our messages and how we design and communicate to the target groups that we are looking at. To that end, what does this mean for Peoria? First, we need to reimagine how we put out public information about health and extreme heat. We need to include images, graphs in the design of our heat risk communication to the people. Images draw attention to the posters, the flyers, and everything that we put out that has heat information so that they could first look at it. And images help them to find this information quickly as opposed to reading long paragraphs or passages. Secondly, we need to communicate what the people would lose when they go outside. For an example, instead of recommending that people stay indoors, it might be helpful when we paint a picture of what is likely to happen when they go outside. For an example, you have a greater chance of experiencing heat stroke or heat exhaustion when you go outside. For that reason, you have to stay indoors. This enables people to see the clearer picture and to take the recommended action. And finally, we need to use tailored messaging for our vulnerable groups. For communities such as Black communities who may tend to say that I have melanin, a clear communication structure could say that melanin is not enough, UV rays or heat risk is deadly. These 3 strategies could help us inform and redesign our health risk communication in the city of Peoria so that people could easily adopt them. Thank you.
To piggyback off of the relevant visualization concept, we get to the sociological perspective of symbolic interactionism and how that can be applied to heat communication. Symbolic interactionism focuses on how individuals interact with each other through subjective gestures, implications, and nonverbal communications. For example, the wheelchair symbol denotes some form of improved access for people with limited mobility, while a hand gesture in which the thumb points up or down means yes or no, respectively. These social roles are assigned by our society, and as far as marketing goods aren't simply bought for functionality, but how it symbolized the individual groups that purchase the good. Defining target audience. Underrepresented communities include people of color, populations of people who feel misunderstood and not cared towards, and people with mental and physical disabilities. Another target audience includes teens, young adults, and children transitioning through life as they're slowly gaining more independence and realization of social groups. Recommendations include the communication should transmit some sort of feeling or personability to the audience, attach some sort of meaning to a campaign. An audience wants to fall for some sort of narrative or story. It's not simply a matter of relaying information, but how that information can be best relayed so that the audience is actually concerned. To have a clear marketing plan. Understand that you're creating a symbolic relationship with the audience. Have something to rally behind so that people don't have to utilize too much mental capacity to understand your marketing campaign. And number 3, work with members representing subcommunities to have a full grasp. I will now be handing it over to Akanksha.
Hello everyone, I am Akanksha Pawar and today I'm going to be talking about impact of extreme heat on health and response strategies. In order to help people lessen the risk associated with extreme heat and to inform the public, Arizona currently uses a number of measures. With rise in global temperature, adaptations to extreme heat condition is an important factor. So, what is resilience? And how do we improve resilience across Peoria? The ability to cope mentally or emotionally with a crisis or to quickly return to pre-crisis status is referred to as psychological resilience. Most people who have already been exposed to heat adapt to hot environments quickly. Building resilience to extreme heat can be difficult for some people, particularly those with diseases, young children, people who are traveling, and the elderly. Conducting a study model which will help better understand public awareness of heat warnings and perception of heat health risk, communication activities to build resilience among different communities. Here are some of the activities that can be conducted to improve education about extreme heat among different communities. The activities are recommended based on the survey that was being conducted across Maricopa County. Some of the important ones are inserting labels or small posters to take precautions while taking these medication in extreme heat environment, presentation and interaction activities related to heat health risk and precautions that are delivered to daycare and school every year during pre-heat season, spreading heat health messages by collaborating with traffic control department on the digital boards on highways. Thank you.
Hello, our group focused on the homeless population and how they are impacted by extreme heat in Arizona. The driving force behind my research is the fact that the homeless truly are disproportionately affected by extreme heat. And as you can see from this data, from 2020 to 2021, they accounted for over 50% of these deaths. So my research was focused on why these numbers are so high and ways in which we can lower them. The first reason is the urban heat island effect. When it comes to densely populated cities with lots of buildings, the temperatures in these areas are going to be higher than they would be naturally. Ways in which we can counteract this is building with heat mitigating materials and planting heat mitigating vegetation. Reason number 2 is water insecurity. As we all know, staying hydrated and drinking water is very important in times of extreme heat. So when the homeless don't have access to these resources and are outside for a majority of the time, they're at much higher risk of dehydration. And one way that we can help this is by providing water at cooling centers and shelters and delivering them to encampments, as well as adding more water fountains in areas where the homeless population can be found. Reason number 3 is cooling centers. As great as they may sound, they aren't being used most effectively. They aren't open in later times of the day, and they're often closed on weekends. This is something that we can change very easily, lengthening these hours, staying open on weekends, and communicating this better to the populations that need it most. The last reason ties into that aspect of communication. Public announcements and warnings aren't reaching these vulnerable communities. Ways in which we can change this is making homeless-specific communication channels, such as verbal announcements at shelters and encampments, as well as print materials that can be placed in areas where the homeless are located.
Further research focuses on communicating extreme heat to the homeless and identifying opportunities to make resources available to them. On a nationwide scale, severe heat kills more people in the US than all other weather-related catastrophes combined. Medical illnesses and being elderly are well-known risk factors for mortality during a heat wave, as are living alone, being exposed to environmental pollutants, being socially isolated, not having access to AC, drug misuse, and mental health concerns. The homeless are likely to have these combinations. Around the country, heat contributes to some 1,500 deaths annually, and advocates estimate about half of those people are homeless. Without an understanding of where vulnerable populations are and what areas are expected to have a higher vulnerability, adaptation solutions are likely to fall short of protecting large portions of the population. To improve recovery from illnesses brought on by excessive heat, a multimodal strategy is needed. A multi-channel offline communication model directed specifically to the homeless for them to easily access the available coping mechanisms is necessary. From the literature review, some common themes emerge. Geospatial mapping. For example, in Romania and Melbourne, many researchers use heat risk assessment methodology to develop heat vulnerability, hazard, and impact maps to prepare for extreme heat events and mitigate risk around those areas. Across the globe, low income people and other vulnerable groups were more likely to be exposed to extreme heat during non motorized mobility. As the homeless travel by foot or public transport, it is essential to provide them with transport services to reach the resources they need. It is crucial to emphasize, however, that even when knowledge gaps are filled, impediments to protective action may still exist. Other barriers to communication include unfamiliarity with using communication technologies, like emergency preparedness apps and social media, limited English language proficiency, and lack of access to internet, cell phone reception. Here are some recommendations based on the research conducted, which aims to improve the conditions of homeless during extreme heat events. Expanding the reach of heat related awareness and alert messaging. Diversifying communication channels to include not only the National Weather Services, county and local government agencies, but also existing networks such as those comprised of nonprofit and community based organizations, neighborhood schools, and peepholes. Other chances to meet people where they are exist to reach at risk population who may not be served by established health outreach and management programs. This could also be implemented. Expanding the effectiveness of heat related awareness and alert messaging. A shift from more generalized to thorough and particular material should be used to boost the effectiveness of heat risk education and warning messaging by utilizing locally defined measurements to determine which geographical locations or population within those areas are most exposed. Specific and clear steps to take to mitigate the health impacts on an individual and community level. Multilingual messaging based on the geography and demography should be implemented. Also, a proactive year round approach to heat risk education and warning messages organized through official campaigns to provide possibilities for the homeless to become informed about and prepared for heat risk should be done. For example, creating campaigns during winter and spring at locations where homeless people reside to educate them about heat risk while integrating with existing communication channels could be beneficial. These operations would be synchronized across networks to the greatest extent possible, such that both teaching and messaging materials are iterative, that is, to reinforce knowledge, and consistent, that is, to ensure clarity and build trust. Arranging means of transport to avail the resources. Using geospatial analysis of where the homeless population reside, a quick transportation service on those hotspot areas could be provided for the homeless to reach cooling shelters easily without costing them too much money. This would ensure that the transportation as a barrier is eliminated. Foot on ground to educate and provide resources. It is important to meet the homeless population where they reside because not everyone would have access to communication channels and not everyone would be aware of the effects of extreme heat. Ensuring there is some food on ground to distribute them water bottles, flyers about extreme heat resources would be beneficial. This again could be done using a geospatial mapping of the hotspots.
Did you know that there are about 9,000 men, women, and children in Maricopa County that are homeless? This is according to Phoenix Rescue Mission. With all the resources available, because there are many in Maricopa County, why are there so many people still living on the streets? According to J Urban Health, homelessness is a persistent global challenge with significant health impacts on those affected. Homeless people are the most exposed to weather conditions and the social and economic problems caused by extreme weather and climate change and variability. There are not a lack of resources, but the available resources are not up to the standards they need to be. In research done by Quickhaven, they were able to come up with a list of reasons homeless people refuse to go to shelters. 1. Shelters don't allow pets. A lot of homeless people have pets, so if they're not able to bring their pets to their shelters, it's like not being able to bring their own family member. 2. A lot of people have mental illnesses, such as depression, anxiety, schizophrenia, etc. People with mental illnesses are not allowed at shelters and are often turned away. There's a higher risk of being attacked at shelters as well, whether it's by other homeless people or people outside of the shelters. Disabled people are often not taken care of at shelters because there is no one there to help with their special needs. There are also very strict drug rules at shelters. So many people, especially homeless, have substance addictions and they are not given the resources to be able to overcome those at shelters. In addition, there are health concerns and limited space at many shelters. My recommendations are shelters need to be improved to accommodate more needs. This will help get people off the streets and protected from such dangers as extreme heat. Shelters either need to be improved to be more inclusive, or the city needs to create more shelters specifically designed to help people with specific needs. This includes hiring staff properly suited to helping people with mental illnesses or disabilities or any other problems, finding a way to allow pets into shelters, having a security team to prevent fights or attacks, finding ways to still help people without bending the drug rules. This could be creating special shelters or just having a security team. There are many dangers from living on the streets, so improving shelters would probably make such a difference in so many people's lives. There are a lot of resources available, so refining them and making them work for the homeless community's needs would be very beneficial to many people.
Researchers have found that due to global warming, global well-being could decrease by another 17% by the end of this decade. Although the global community feels this impact, the impact is disproportionate, with the seniors and the vulnerable members of the community feeling it more. Effort should be directed at communication that prepare this community for extreme heats. So based on the research that I did, these are some of the recommendations that would be helpful in ensuring that the members of the community, especially in Peoria, stay more prepared for the extreme heat. So the first one is collaborate with local media stations to spread the information to these groups. This is because when you collaborate with local media stations, information will be tailored to the members of the community. Therefore, it will be more effective. The next one is present the information as news rather than advertisements. This is because when you present the information as news, people are more inclined to discuss, and it will also generate discussions, which leads to people taking action, as opposed to advertisements that more people become desensitized to it as the more they see it. The next recommendation would be communication should always consider the abilities of the group. So whenever information is being sent out to these members of the group, consideration should be put into how the people will perceive the information, how easy it is for them to understand the information being presented, and what steps are being given to them, and are they able to actually take those steps. And the last one is collaborate with caregivers among these communities in order to share the information. Caregivers are with these members of the community most of the time, therefore they understand what kind of information will be helpful to them. So collaborating with them would actually help them in being prepared. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Soledad Romero, and I'm very pleased to welcome you to our presentation about communicating extreme heat to the older adult and elderly population. We are part of the Extreme Heat Communication Project working with the City of Peoria, and specifically, we are in the Fundamentals of Technical Communication course. In this presentation, we will go through each member's research, what they found while doing their report, and their individual recommendations, as well at the end go over general recommendations and our conclusions. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Anushka Shetty. I'm doing my master's in user experience. After a few months of research, I have come up with 3 recommendations that might help in improving heat communication with older adults. First is conducting offline workshops and seminars, where a government or medical official can demonstrate how heat-related health issues, for example, heat stroke, can be prevented by taking simple measures at home. For the benefit of as many individuals as possible, I would suggest keeping these workshops free. The benefit of this is if they have any doubt, they can directly ask the official. It will help them come out of social isolation and engage with community in person. Next is to use infographics and posters to communicate heat-related information. These can be stuck on walls of community centers, old age homes, and hospitals, etc. If designed in a way that is older adult friendly, like using big fonts, good contrast, print documents can be really effective. By providing an offline medium, we will be giving older adults alternative ways to access heat information. Lastly, conducting a usability study to improve existing communication channels, such as websites. It will help us in better understanding the real problems that older adults face while accessing heat information. So instead of coming up with an entirely new approach, we can work on improving the existing ones. Here is a recap of my recommendations. That's from my side. Thank you, everyone.
Hi, my name is Rajivni, and my talk is particularly relevant to internet-based heat risk communication. According to the research, older adults are more likely to trust the information that comes from someone they know rather than from posters or newspapers. By using Facebook, older adults can connect with others in their community and get information from people they know. In my presentation, I'll focus on three major recommendations that would help in communicating extreme heat risk information to the older adults. First, I recommend providing heat risk information through social media. By providing heat related information on social media, we can facilitate the learning activity to occur. Particularly for older adults, if they could learn heat risks acquired via social media and transform it internal knowledge, or if they can share information to their committee members, then they can protect themselves as well as others from heat. The second recommendation I have is to create videos for posting on the internet, as videos are more effective than written articles. My final recommendation is to organize events to teach older adults how to use social media to to find and share information. Research found that only a limited number of older adults in Peoria use social media. So posting heat related information on social media is of little value if no one uses it to learn about extreme heat. Therefore, it is important for them to know how to join community groups and share information. I hope these recommendations will help Peoria residents stay safe during extreme heat. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Soledad Romero, and I specifically focused on how to communicate extreme heat risk to the elderly and older adult population. There are many studies that I found in my research that show that the elderly population is at more risk than other populations in the valley to extreme heat. And as you can see from this table, there are many parts of Peoria that also have a higher heat vulnerability than other parts of the valley. And some of the trends that I found in my research, specifically on how this population kind of perceives heat risk, is that there are some that know the risk that heat poses, but don't necessarily connect it back to themselves. Or there is a lack of resources and community that this population feels that in turn causes them to suffer from extreme heat more than others. So I came up with two communication guidelines that the city of Peoria can follow when communicating extreme heat. The first guideline is to make the communication personal so that these people can connect heat risk to themselves. And you can do this by using a trusted community leader or primary care physician, and also using community channels to communicate extreme heat. For example, using the community center that Peoria utilizes and doing initiatives and activities to explain heat risk. Thank you.
Hey everyone, I'm Vandana Tota, currently pursuing Masters in Human-Computer Interaction, and we've been given an opportunity to present our recommendations to the various popular audiences in Peoria community. I have focused entirely on the elderly population to try and provide recommendations to help them get the right message and take precautions. Some of my recommendations are utilizing other nations' heatwave plans, which involve Belgium and Netherlands heatwave action plans, which I have read the complete research paper, show that general practitioners usually used to deliver the messages in aged care facilities to a vulnerable population, and also disseminate information to give the alert messages to everyone so that they know what's coming and what precautions that can be taken, which created a huge impact to their heatwave action plans. Coming to the weather-related and heat-related systems, Maricopa County has these systems where it detects the areas where heat-related deaths are more. So we can utilize those systems into our convenience and understand the targeted areas and provide more, like distribute more flyers or brochures and conduct programs to bring awareness. The next recommendation is communicating messages with intent. Usually elderly population connects more to the content which are emotionally significant and also prioritize more positives than negatives, which can surely help us to giving them the right message that deeply touches to them and also provide the precautions to prevent the deaths. To summarize my recommendations, utilizing other nations' heat wave plans will surely benefit us, and also the heat-related systems which tracks the death can help us to target more in those areas. And communicating messages with intent is the most important thing when distributing flyers, brochures, or any programs that we're going to conduct moving forward. Thank you so much.
Hello everyone, this is Lashwath Rai Patnana. Having done my research on communicating effective strategies for older adults of Peoria, I have come up with the following recommendations. Firstly, conducting technical get-together sessions by connecting senior citizens with young adults. Organizing these technical get-togethers on weekends would be a great way to connect senior citizens with young adults, while also helping senior adults learn how to use today's technology to make their lives easier. Learning how to use online shopping apps can eliminate the necessity to go out and buy essentials like groceries and clothing, especially on hot summer days. My second recommendation would be building the community heat relief kiosks to address the specific needs of elderly people during hot weather days. These kiosks will be designed to provide tips and information related to symptoms of heat stress and other heat-related illnesses, and what to do when an emergency occurs among the older adults. Community heat relief kiosks will be placed at key locations in the community and will be run by government officials or volunteers from local health agencies. In this approach, volunteers will monitor weather reports in the local community to identify people who may have risk to heat stress. Coming to the conclusion, working on existing formats and improving community centers to accommodate recommended facilities and implementing heat awareness workshops would be beneficial to older adults. Introducing new formats that are to conduct tech classes and making older adults digital illiterate can have positive impacts on their health and overall well-being. Understanding the importance of having access to the internet and electricity can help prevent isolation that many older adults face and allow them to connect with their communities and remain active and healthy. With that said, I would like to conclude my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. I never, back to our first conversation, I gave you my goal to come up with something. I see so many cool things. I wouldn't know where. I need you to tell me where to start, honestly, because just like graphics and infographics and vulnerable populations and stuff. It's wow. Fantastic job.
Yeah, do you have any answers? Where to start? What stuck out? Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, I didn't know you had the microphone. Alrighty. So I know specifically for my part of the project, I did the older adults and elderly populations. I actually did talk to Ryan Stevens, who works with the Active Adults program. And I think a very feasible place to start would be holding a regular class in the kind of more before a lot of people leave for the summer. So maybe February, March, holding a class on extreme heat. I think that's a very, a good place to start. Maybe just with the research that we've collected and using like the CDC website, just coming up with a simple presentation and having a class say, hey, if you want to come down at this time, we're going to be talking about heat risk, or even at one of the events that you already have planned, maybe having a booth there or something like that. I think that as long as we try to get information out there at the events that you guys already put on, I think that's a good place to start. I know a lot of our recommendations and our part of the project were utilizing the community center. So since you already have that platform utilized, since you already use it all the time, maybe starting there is a good start. But yeah, if anyone has anything else to say.
So one of my recommendations was to collaborate with local artists. And there are a lot of local artists, especially out here, who have farm stands and what is it called? The farmer's market. So if you put in a tiny sample with the brochures, people are more likely to pick it up because there's something free that you're giving out with it. So maybe a sample of lip balm or sample of, say, a perfume smell put onto it. People like interaction. So they'll pick it up, smell it, and then be like, oh, I like this. Let me check it out, and probably go to their website. So it's a win-win situation for both. And even giving out stickers. Usually people who are tourists come in and they would like to take something back from wherever. So I remember when we visited Peoria too, when you gave us that cute goodie bag, all of us stuck the stickers somewhere. All of us put the pins on our bags, right? So it's like a win-win situation, and you also love what you get. So you call them back or you say, oh, I love this design. Someone else wants it. Where do I get more? And that way we can increase people picking up the brochure, because I remember one of your problems where people don't even touch the brochure. They're not interested in even looking at it. So add something on that someone wants to pick up and see, oh, what is this? I want to check it out.
So in addition to brochures and how you advertise HIT, we also think that people listen to other people. So one of the ways to drive persuasion is to make sure that you have people who are like drivers of change. For an example, for the elderly population, they go to the hospitals with heat stroke, heat exhaustion. We could have the nurses giving them information about how heat is affecting their health. We know that they have underlying health, but heat is inducing some of the recent increase in their infections or whatever situations they have. So once they know that the nurses are saying this, they are more likely to take their word than maybe the brochure, what the brochure has to say. So that's also a very good place to start as well.
Awesome. Okay, one more question from Peoria. Great.
Just an observation. So you have two big utility companies in this part of the world, APS and SRP. And then I know this very topic has been at the forefront of what we call MAG. It's called Maricopa Association of Governments. And I'm with Glenn. The level of analytic and recommendation that you've all pieced together throughout these, it's pretty phenomenal. I think this kind of transcends not only Peoria's experience, I think it's all incredibly useful, and we'll put it to good work. But I think there are a couple other pieces that, Anne, you might want to think about, or Julia, exposing this to someone from Human Services and MAG. I think every other Valley city would benefit from receiving this information as well. So I think you did a great job. And you're absolutely right. It's about communication. And in this case, it's a little proactive. It's a lot proactive. We need to make sure we get out and ensure our residents are they have the means, number one. And if they don't, there's a place for them to go so they can have a little respite. So I thought you did a fantastic job. Thank you.
And I will say that was a big part of why I was excited to work on with Kat on this project too, and her students, is that it's kind of the beginning of things. So Glenn was like, I don't know where to start. Like, what do we do? So I think you all did such a good job kind of bringing in a huge kind of like just, I don't know, platter of recommendations, because that's where Peoria is right now.